One night, I woke up to use the bathroom, walking down the hallway with my phone in hand. I bumped into a girl in a white dress. Without looking up, I said, "Sorry," and kept walking. Lost in my thoughts, it didn't even cross my mind that I wasn't staying at the dorm that night, but at my own house. The next day, my boyfriend and I were planning to go to the movies. He came to pick me up from home. When I got ready and stepped outside, he said to me, "Why were you staring at me from the upstairs window for so long? And why did you change? Weren't you just wearing a white dress?" But I didn't even own a white dress. I was watching TV in the living room when I suddenly noticed movement in the bedroom. I couldn't believe my eyes, so I rubbed them several times, thinking I must be imagining things. But no, I wasn't mistaken. A figure emerged from the closet and slowly walked across the room. It stopped abruptly, turned its head toward me, and locked eyes with mine. Then it raised its finger to its lips, motioning for me to stay silent. Its face was eerily pale and expressionless. After a moment that felt like an eternity, it turned around, walked back to the closet, and disappeared. I work in a morgue. I prepared the body of a child for the family to come and see. During that time, I felt someone tug at my hair. Then I heard a soft chuckle, followed by the sound of a door slamming. Suddenly, all the equipment in the room stopped, and a deep silence filled the air. Still, I continued with my work and dressed the body. However, after a while, I felt a touch on my shoulder and a warmth on my lower back. At that moment, it felt like someone was hugging me from behind, at the height of the child I had just dressed. When I turned around, no one was there. This continued until the child's body disappeared. When I was a child, my family and I moved into a new apartment. Every evening, my sister would force me to close the window of my bedroom. When I looked outside through the glass, I would see three faces without hair, noses, or mouths. They would just stand there and stare, not doing anything. As a child, I didn't tell anyone. A few months ago, we were talking about that old house, and I remembered the faces I had seen and shared the story. My sister was very surprised and turned to me, saying, "I used to see the same faces, which is why I always made you close the windows while sleeping." That's when we learned that before we moved in, a murder had been committed in that house. A few years ago, I was playing a game on the computer in the upstairs room at my mom's house. The door to the house opened, and I heard my mom shout, "Amber, I'm home." I thought she was calling me to help with the shopping bags, so I ran downstairs quickly. But my mom wasn't there, and her car wasn't there either. She hadn't come home at all. I still wonder, who was it that called my name? It was 2 years ago. I was lying in bed, half asleep and half awake. Suddenly, I felt like I was being pulled by my feet. I immediately sat up, but this time, I couldn't breathe. I was suffocating. I tried to breathe for a few minutes. My mom heard me and came to check on me. I don't even remember what happened after that. The scarier part was in the morning. My mom said she couldn't remember my coughing fit, but in her dream, she saw the devil trying to pull me away from her, and that's when she came to my side. We had a very sweet, very gentlemanly elderly neighbor. He would tend to his garden every day, and we would chat whenever I passed by. One day, as I walked by again, I greeted him, but he didn't say anything. I thought he might not want to be disturbed, so I continued on. A few days later, there was a hearse and people waiting in front of his house. I learned that our neighbor had gone for a walk in the forest a week earlier, had a heart attack, and died there. They had only found his body that day, a week later. I couldn't believe my ears. I had tried to chat with him just a few days before. A few years ago, I went to visit my brother, his wife, and their children. They were living in a very old house, even dating back to the 18th century. We were playing with my little nephew on the couch in the living room when suddenly the television turned on by itself. It was showing static. My 3-year-old nephew didn't seem surprised at all, as if it was something he always did. He got up from beside me, ran over, and turned off the TV. "How did you know the TV would turn on?" I asked. He replied, "They come and turn it on at this time every night." My brothers and I used to deliver newspapers in the same neighborhood, and we would also leave a paper at a woman named Sarah's house. Since she lived alone, one of us would go inside to check if she was okay. One day, it was my turn to go in. I entered, and she was lying on her bed, sleeping. Without making a sound, I placed the newspaper on her table and left. The next day, she was still asleep, and she hadn't even touched the previous day's paper. The following day, when I went inside, Sarah was awake. She said she was very happy and hugged me. But the next day, I saw cars in front of her house. Sarah had passed away in her bed 4 days earlier, yet I had talked to her and hugged her just the day before. If the person I hugged wasn't Sarah, then who was it? We never visited Sarah's house again after that day. A few years ago, one night, my boyfriend and I woke up in panic at the same time. We looked at each other, trying to figure out what was happening. At that moment, as we opened our eyes, a picture frame hanging on the wall fell to the floor. The unexpected event scared us even more. We immediately asked each other what had happened, and I told him, "I had a nightmare. They were stabbing you in it." My boyfriend was shocked and said, "I also had a dream at the exact same time where you were being stabbed." This strange similarity both frightened and bewildered us. Shortly after, we started hearing my mom's screams from downstairs. The sound was so clear that it felt like our hearts would stop. We looked at each other and asked, "What's going on?" In that moment of panic and fear, I thought my mom was downstairs, so I rushed to go down. When I got downstairs, there was no one there. I didn't realize it in the moment, but then I remembered we were living in California, and my mom was in England. There was no one else in the house. With the fear and confusion we experienced, we thought everything might just be a coincidence, or that somehow things were connected. After that day, we decided never to stay in that house again.